Hi, let's talk about quick fixes for thesis statements. These are ways to improve your undergraduate papers. Now, thesis statements are the area that most students have the most difficulty understanding and creating. So let's begin with a baseline understanding of what a thesis statement is and is supposed to be. The thesis statement is a contract with your reader. You are setting the terms for your paper. This contract appears at the beginning of the paper, usually after a hook, and is the last sentence of a paragraph. It should be a single sentence, one sentence. So it does not have to be the last sentence of the first paragraph, but it needs to be the last sentence of a paragraph at the beginning of your paper. And yes, you will be expected in most college classrooms, if you're writing a short paper, and a short paper is a paper that ranges anywhere from 3 pages to 12 to 15 pages, to be able to summarize your argument in a single sentence. Now, the thesis statement allows you to define the task you set yourself in the paper. Many students misunderstand. They set themselves tasks that they can't accomplish. Once you realize that you're in charge of the task and how well you succeed, you will do much better. Remember that your thesis statement should be narrow and it should be specific. It should match exactly what you prove. Exactly. So when you're thinking about the beginning of your paper, think of your essay's introduction as an inverted pyramid. This is a helpful metaphor. So you will have some sort of hook that catches the reader's attention and shows the importance of the task. And that will lead to a thesis statement. You'll move from a more general hook to a more specific thesis statement. The hook introduces your topic. It shows the reader its importance. The rest of the introduction walks the reader to the thesis statement logically and naturally. Here's an example of a paper that's developing. A student's writing this paper, and the first sentence is a hook. This student asks a rhetorical question to interest the reader. Would you volunteer to die in the place of someone that you love? Well, that's going to interest most readers. They immediately know the answer, which is the point of a rhetorical question. You are not asking to get the answer, you're asking to make a point about the answer. Now the next sentence, Katniss Everdeen, the main character in The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, the beginning of the sentence takes that hook and it links it. It provides a transition to the rest of the point. That Katniss makes the same choice many readers would hope they could make in such a situation. Now that may sound sort of improbable, but most people would want to die for someone that they loved, or in the place of someone that they loved. They would want to at least believe that they would be willing to make a sacrifice like that. So the hook, once again, is this rhetorical question. It's broad, it's general. Would you volunteer to die in the place of someone that you love? But the hook serves an important point, an important purpose. It links to the thesis. Now, this is the thesis the student eventually arrives at. Katniss Everdeen's choice to volunteer for the Hunger Games, to essentially sacrifice herself, is only one of a series of choices that mark her as both heroic and as a likable character, and as a proxy for readers. Now, you can tell this thesis needs a little more work, but the areas outlined in red are connected to the hook. Her choice is the choice that readers might be asked to make. Would you be willing to sacrifice your life for someone? And proxy basically means that she is serving as a substitute for readers. They want to be her. They empathize with her. She represents the best of them. Now here are the elements of this thesis statement that form the contract with your readers. Do this. Highlight your points. Highlight your keywords in every thesis statement that you write. Say, what am I proving and where do I prove it? And walk yourself through the paper usually in the editing process, but sometimes in the writing process, and make sure that you cover these points. Break it down into a series of bullets like I have here. She made a choice to volunteer for the Hunger Games. You need to cover that. This is part of a series of choices that mark her as heroic, that she is a likable character, and that she's a proxy for readers. Now, does each one of these need at least one paragraph? Yes. Does each one only need one paragraph? No. You can write multiple paragraphs about each of these. Now, in the writing process, often you'll discover that one of these might be an area that you spend 4 pages on, 5 pages on. If this is only a 6 or 7 page paper, then what do? You just knock the rest of the topics out of the way. You focus on just that. You revise your thesis statement. You revise your hook. Now, once again, these are the areas that are connected to the current hook. What happens if you end up making a different argument as you write your paper? Well, get rid of that hook and replace it with someone that emphasizes the significance of the argument you do make. Once again, as a reminder, proxy in this case represents a substitute for someone else. Make sure you understand the words you're using. Don't just grasp for words. Use a word that makes sense and talk to your instructor about it. Read. Okay, here are some examples of hooks and then the arguments that should appear in the thesis statements that are connected to them. So if your hook is, as we did this time, would you volunteer to die in the place of someone that you love, the argument in the thesis is, Katniss becomes a proxy for readers. She's a substitute for readers. So just as she volunteers to die, they would volunteer to die. They would hope that they would volunteer to die. Now, in the Hunger Games, Katniss Everdeen is forced to watch as her little sister's name is drawn as a tribute for televised games that force competitors to fight to the death. This is a fine hook. It's specific, but it is intriguing to readers, so it immediately lets readers know what we're talking about. It sets the stage for an argument. Now, what argument can you make in your thesis statement with this? The participants in the games represent their districts metaphorically, forced to die to entertain the capital. Now, there's a lot you can talk about in terms of the participants in the games and how they are metaphorically representing their districts. This would make an excellent paper topic. Okay, here's another hook. In the book Mockingjay, Katniss Everdeen says of another character, Peeta, "Sometimes when I'm alone, I take the pearl from where it lives in my pocket and try to remember the boy with the bread, the strong arms that warded off nightmares on the train, the kisses in the arena." Now, this is a quotation that immediately intrigues readers, and it can be tied to this part of a thesis statement. Now, the thesis statement itself might be bigger. It might deal with more things. Katniss and Peeta's relationship is symbolized by the pearl. Now, that's the argument. That might be the only argument for your paper, but it might also be one of several, showing things metaphorically that represent their relationship. Most readers will agree that the Hunger Games novels are, in some ways, a commentary on the reality television of today. So here's the hook, and it should represent some significant part of that argument, that thesis statement. The Hunger Games is not only a commentary on today's reality television, it is a warning about tyranny and state power. So this can be your thesis statement. Here's a critical revision note. Change your hook and thesis statement as you revise. So often, when you begin a paper, you'll write a hook that is somewhere to begin. You'll just start writing. And your thesis statement will hopefully change as you write, but it will be something also that may not directly represent your argument. So make them match. The last thing you should touch before you turn in your paper is your thesis statement. And the thing you should touch right before that is your hook. You'll read your entire paper and you'll ask yourself, what did I prove here? You'll fix your topic sentences and you'll lead your reader naturally from point to point. And you'll ask yourself, by looking at your topic sentences, what was the purpose of each paragraph? And you'll bundle your keywords into your thesis statement. You'll pick 1 or 2 elements of that thesis statement and put them in the hook. And then you have created a good paper.